All right. We're live.
Yes.
All right. So I'm here with Vindell Smith. Thank you for joining me today. Appreciate you making the time.
No worries.
Yeah. Um, so you got a pretty cool gig right now. For people who have never heard of you before, uh, who are you playing with? What kind of stuff are you up to these days? And then we'll start to jump back in time and start at the beginning.
Gotcha. Well, currently I'm the guitar player for Kirk Franklin and Mary Mary and Erica Campbell, a new worship band I'm a part of called Season Collective, and Dion Kipping, among other things that I used to do.
Yeah, I mean as far as the gospel scene is concerned, or otherwise, I mean, Kirk Franklin's you kind of starting at the top of the food chain. So many amazing songs, and I really appreciate how he's really kind of crossed over also into popular music with some of the other collaborations that he's done. Have you been on those records or those live performances with like Chance the Rapper and what was the other one was with I forget her name. The blonde-haired
Tori Kelly.
Tori Kelly. Yeah, that's right.
Um, Myself and the bass player Matt Ramsey, we're kind of the newbies, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
Um, we both came on, excuse me, before the 20 Years in One Night tour, which was 2016.
Okay, got it.
It's roughly about 4 years, whereas everybody else in the band has been there a minimum of 10.
Wow.
So a lot of those I haven't necessarily gotten a chance to record with Kirk as yet,
Yeah.
but because he has a really strong Dallas team, that's pretty much his go-tos, and rightfully so.
For session stuff.
Yeah.
Got it. And how did you come upon that gig? What did that look like?
Well, that's an interesting story.
All right.
I would say the seed was planted while I was on another gig, if that makes any sense. My good friend and big brother, world renowned guitar player Doc Powell was Kirk's guitar player for about 15 years, if I'm not mistaken. So he pretty much said, "Hey, is yours if you want it," kind of thing. But when I met Doc Powell, I was on my third Mary Mary gig. I started playing with Mary Mary in 2008. So I've been with them for about 12 years. So I'm on the gig, terrified. I hadn't really done stuff like that before. And we happened to be, I think it was Houston, Texas. And, Kirk is headlining, of course. And we're there. And I meet Doc Powell. I'm like, yo, this is Doc Powell. And he's the nicest guy. And he's like, hey, man, how you doing? Like, just like, how you like the gig? I was like, it's cool, man. I was like, I'm just trying to keep up. He's like, man, you're fine. You're fine. So from that day, we just built this friendship. And we just kept in touch. And how you doing? We would see each other on some shows where they were headlining, and I would stay in here and rip. And it just so happens, excuse me, the end of 2015, I think Kirk had just done, I want to say that album is Losing My Religion. I think that came out November 2015. And the end of December, Doc texts me and he says, hey man, what are you doing next March? And I was like, I'm not doing anything. And he was like, well, if you're free, I want to throw your name in the hat to do this Kirk tour. He's like, I want to really finish up my record and focus on some other things. So if you want me to, I said, of course, sure. So about a month later, interestingly enough, I'm in Jamaica for my grandmother's funeral. My parents are Jamaican. So I'm sitting in my grandmother's house, and I get a call from an unknown number, and I'm like, "Hello," because I'm always curious. So even if I see unknown numbers, I'm the guy that's gonna pick up, even if I gotta hang up. I just have to know. So I pick up the phone, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" This is Kirk, man. I'm like, so imagine me standing on the street in a part of Jamaica that a lot of people probably have never even heard of, talking to the greatest gospel musician, greatest gospel artist of all time, and I'm just sitting there like, it was just like a surreal moment. Doc speaks real highly of you, and if you're down, I would love to have you. And I was like, sure. Kirk and I had a kind of a short experience. I was in the house band for the singing competition Sunday Best. It was like season 3 and 4, like 2009 and 2010. So I think one of the things that kind of, helped buffer my name a little bit was I was in the house band. I had already been a part of something that he had done. And I think he kind of remembered me from that. So he's like, "Hey man, if you're willing, I'll, shoot your information over to blah, 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 and we'll get it done." And a couple of months later, I'm in Dallas rehearsing for 20 years in one night.
Nice.
That was a long way to tell you how that happened.
That was good. That was good. What did the rehearsals look like? Like what is a Kirk Franklin like tour preparation look like, or rehearsals look like?
Oh man.
There's a lot of key modulations, a lot of changes. You got to remember all the hits. Are you getting a lead sheet? Is it just like you just got to memorize it, or what does it look like?
Oh yeah, you definitely have to memorize. Right. You definitely have to memorize it. That week was pretty daunting for the simple fact that it started out about 50 songs. By the time it got to us, it was about 41. And the thing about it is, it was my first experience with Kirk as far as the tour setting. It was the bass player's first experience. So we're sitting there, we get to the rehearsal, Kirk hasn't, shown up yet, and we're like, "Hey man, what was that lick on that song?" Because we don't necessarily know. One thing that I didn't know at the time is like the way Kirk's genius works is that he kind of has the pieces and he has to be in the room, and then he kind of throws the stuff at the wall. He has like the template, and then the moment he's throwing, all right, we could do this, come out of this, and come out of this, and come out of this. So not knowing that, myself and the bass player, Matt Ramsey, we're going back and forth. What was that lick on the second verse of that song? And then, the veterans were just sitting there looking at us. My good friend, Aaron Lewis, super producer. He's probably been there the least amount of time, except for me and Matt, which is about 10 years. So he's sitting on the couch. He said, "Hey man," I said, "What's up?" He said, "You see what Terry and Sean are doing?" Now they've been there for about 20 years. I was like, "Yeah." They're just sitting there on their phone. He said, "Do that." So it's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Do that." So we're not gonna know what's going on until Kirk's here. I was like, sure enough, he comes in and it's like lightning. I've never seen somebody take 40 songs and just stitch it and weave it together. Are we going to do this? The first verse for this. We're going to do the second verse for this. These 4 songs are going to be a medley. Did you bring your acoustic? All right, play this. Da-da-da-da. Like kind of like da-da-da-da. All right, da-da-da. And it's like rapid fire.
What instruments does Kirk play?
Kirk plays piano.
And is he proficient on any other instruments, or is he just like dictating it to you a melody if it's different than the record, or is he playing it for you on the piano, or is he singing it for you, or how would that work?
I mean, normally it's him on the piano because he's coming in with his ideas and his structure. We're the final piece to the painting, kind of like putting it all together. So he'll just say, "Do you know this or do you know that?"
Right. Now, if you to internalize that, I mean, are you just making some notes like, all right, instead of, you know, instead of going to the chorus here, we're going to modulate up 2 keys and then we're going to change to this song. Do you have to just like make that notation? Or are you just supposed to remember it, or like what's your process to dealing with sort of the it's like almost like a Jackson Pollock painting where you're just splattering paint on the wall, and it comes out beautiful in the end, but the process is haphazard.
Honestly, at that point in my life, I had been well versed in kamikaze concert. You gotta, when it's time to go, you remember. You just have to remember it. It's kind of weird about how I learn music. It's kind of like I kind of remember songs like I remember people. It's kind of like, even if there's somebody that you haven't seen in a long time, when they come in front of you, like automatically your mind downloads everything about them. It's kind of like, oh, they're allergic to this, or last when we went to this restaurant, they didn't like this, or I better not say this because they're sensitive about this. So when it comes to a song, after I've like played it enough, I'm like, okay, we're not doing the first verse. It's the weirdest thing. That's the best way I can explain it to you.
That's
Like
a great analogy.
if it's 100 songs, if I play it enough, I won't forget it. It's the strangest thing. Like I've been under the gun quite a few times. So
I
it's like
wonder.
that you build.
Yeah, I wonder how much of like the way that you come into music informs sort of your ability to be able to have that sort of kind of hard drive space in your brain, because like a lot of guys that I talk to that do American Idol, or they do The Voice or something where they have to learn that volume of songs in a short amount of time. you know they have either sheet music, or they have lead sheets, or they have all these things. A lot of them are not coming from the gospel world. I wonder if there's something about being raised on, or like becoming a musician through that particular vessel, just creates like a brain capacity that like people who are just just learn it from a guitar teacher or something like that don't get that experience. And equally, like people that learn the guitar in the 70s where they were like playing records and having to go backwards and learn stuff without the benefit of YouTube, they have a certain ability that people my age who had YouTube their whole lives or most of their lives to learn guitar music, it changes the way that they approach music. It changes the way that they learn music. And there's going to be certain skill sets that are sort of built into whatever medium is sort of like your teacher, whether it's the church, whether it's YouTube, whether it's, Joe Smith, the guitar teacher in the local shop.
It absolutely does. When I, started really playing for real and trying to learn songs, it was trying to mimic stuff I heard on the radio. And then when I had some kind of responsibility for a worship service, it was just listening to the CD constantly. And then when I found out there was sheet music, I would, buy the sheet music. But then there was a difference between the sheet music that was written by the actual artist and music that was written by some company.
Yeah.
It's not right, and it's just blind luck. It's like you may run into a musician who say, "Hey man, that's wrong." Okay, noted.
Yeah.
that was the learning process.
Yeah. I remember some brutal Hal Leonard sheet music, buying that and thinking like, oh, like I remember the first CD I ever bought was Boys to Men 2. I don't know if you remember that album, the blue one. And I wanted to learn how to. At that point, I only had an acoustic guitar because my parents didn't want me to have an electric guitar. And I was like, I want to learn how to play Water Runs Dry, because it's got that acoustic, part throughout it. I think actually Paul Jackson played played it on that record. And you know, about the sheet music, but like all the voicings are like R&B voicings, but it just, you know, it would just show a C as a C. It wouldn't show any sort of, you know, augmented, you know, or any sort of suspended chord or anything like that. And it just, I was like, yeah, it doesn't. I took it to my guitar teacher. She's like, well, those are the notes. I was like, yeah, this doesn't sound right, you know.
Leading thing ever.
Yeah.
But
But
being on a gig with sheet music and the copyist copied it wrong.
yeah.
It's one of those things where you just gotta figure it out and, you know, make your notations and stuff.
Yeah, or you know, you just memorize it as you did with Kirk.
Oh man.
What did the rig look like for the tour on that? Was it, you know, all digital stuff like Axe Effects or Kempers, or was it like real guitar pedals, real amps, stuff like that?
Oh, absolutely real amps for me.
Okay.
I was in the whole modeling thing in the beginning, and then I was forced to get into the analog world. And then once I got into the analog world, I kind of left the modeling thing. So I'm so far removed from it. Like I have to retrain myself on how to kind of get into it. But to answer your question directly, not to veer off, I did have a pedal board, and what did I have for my amp? There were two legs for that first tour. And the first leg I want to say I had a DeVille.
Okay.
I had a Fender DeVille. And then the second leg in the tour, I developed a relationship with John Brinton from Tyler Amps.
Okay.
And I used the JT46, which is kind of like a plexi.
Okay.
Plexi model, which was pretty sweet.
Nice. And what about guitars? What were you using?
I had a PRS single cut, and for my backup, I used my cousin's Source Strat.
Nice. And what about like pedals? Were you using like a big switcher, or was it just kind of like everything in line with in the front of the amp, or what was that?
Everything was in front of the amp. I didn't get a switcher until after that tour, but it was a small, like 4-channel Musicom.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
But before that, it was just I've been tap dancing for years.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back in time now, reversing, what was sort of like your first real professional gig as a guitar player?
Oh man. Now when you say professional, what do you,
you're getting paid for it? Let's say you're getting paid for it.
Something like, wow, I can't believe I'm here, or like like just getting money. Like
just getting money. This could be local in town gigs. This could be, you know, the church going on a local, you know, like a 4-church run.
I would say that would be 2003. Yeah, we talked about that.
It happens. It comes through your computer. Same with me with the iMessage.
It was about 2003. I had been playing at my dad's church for a long time, and I happened to be visiting a church, and I showed up. I asked them if I could, you know, sit in, and they were like, sure. And then it was cool. And then afterwards, they were already a band, that particular church band, and they're still my brothers till this day. MD from that church, Larry Washington, everybody calls him Boom. He said, you know, there's a community choir that's here. I'm from New Haven, Connecticut. There's a community choir here called Clergyman. If you want to join, he's like, it's not really paying anything, but if you want to just hang out and have a good time, we can do it. So I was like, sure, because you have that point in your life where you just want to play,
right?
And I also appreciate it up front that he said there's no money involved, and not that that's where my mind was, because I was in college for communication, so I wouldn't even like locked into like, I gotta pay bills. This is how I'm gonna do it.
Right.
You know, the very, very first gig, we do it. It was fun, and the choir directors gave me a check for $25. I was like, wow, this is amazing. You know, you weren't expecting it, and then you get paid. It's like, you know, in 2003, $25 went a lot further than it.
Yeah, you could almost get a tank of gas back then.
Exactly. I was hyped, and thinking about it right now, I don't understand why I was so excited about that $25. Even thinking about the $25 right now, I'm still excited about it, and
Yeah.
I don't. But it's just the fact that you thought you're just having fun with your friends, and then you get a check. I was like, not bad.
Yeah. $25 as a college student is a luxury.
Exactly. $25. I can get my hair cut. This is like a week's worth of Chinese food. Like, it was so many things in my head there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, you know, yeah. This is back in Connecticut.
Back in the day.
Did you live pretty close to where you were going to school, or like home was pretty close to where you were going to school?
Freshman year, I went to Drexel University in Philadelphia.
Okay, not that close then Drexel.
But I transferred sophomore year to Southern Connecticut State University, and that was like 10 minutes from where I live. I live like 5 minutes from Yale, because that's what people know New Haven for.
Oh, got it. Nice.
Yes. But the gig was actually in Hartford, Connecticut, which is the capital, which is about 35, 40 minutes away, depending on how fast you drive.
Yeah. Awesome. So you did that, and then what would you say was like the first, like, you know, national tour gig you did?
Well, before the actual tour, before the national tour, there was one of those gigs where like, what am I doing here? I how would I describe this gig? This was before there was a church in New York that I played for about 8 years before I moved to Atlanta, Greater LA Cathedral. And I had done some work with the Minister of Music there, Stanley Brown, who's a super producer from late 80s up until now. And he, you know, being a part of that team always like landed us in some pretty cool positions. Like that kind of leveraged us into the, you know, the Sunday Best, you know, TV show. But before then, Oprah Winfrey used to throw a birthday party for Maya Angelou like every 5 years.
Uh-huh.
And BB Winans was in charge of the music. And Joe Wilson, you know, from Lady Gaga and Beyonce, he was BB Winans' MD back then. And Joe Wilson and Stanley are very close. So he's like, I need a guitar player for this birthday party. Stanley brought me in. So we're rehearsing, we're going, and it was called The Gospel According to Detroit, because BB Winans is from Detroit. And it was all legendary. It was like, you know, the Oprah brunch thing that she does. This was April 2008. So I'm not going to tell you whose house we were at. It was in Florida. And all these legendary gospel artists, BB Winans, his brother Marvin Winans, the Clark sisters, BB and CeCe Winans, because they hadn't recorded together for a long time. But right before they reunited, they did that gig. So that was pretty huge. And I look on the front row, and it's like Tyler Perry, it's Cicely Tyson, it's all these people came to honor Maya Angelou, and Oprah's over there, and I'm sitting there like, what in the world am I doing here? So that was like one of the first, like, okay, I'm a professional now. And that year, my first like real tour, like bus traveling kind of thing, was Mary Mary the next year, which was April 2009. the sound tour.
Wow. So how is that playing the gig at Ofra's? Do you guys get to take part at least in the amazing catering that she does?
Oh man, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Antoine Fisher,
Yeah.
but you remember at the end of the movie where he comes back to the house and his whole family is there, and it's
Yeah.
like that's exactly what it felt like.
Had a big spread, huh?
A huge spread. I couldn't even describe to you the type of food that was in that place. Like I got like pictures on my Facebook. Like I'll never get rid of them. That's where I met. Quincy Jones was there. Like I have a picture with Quincy Jones. Like whoever you could imagine being in that room was in that room, and it was some of the best food I've ever had.
Yeah, I've know a few people that have done the one or done something that she's hosted in Montecito, near Santa Barbara,
Mm-hmm.
and they talk about you got to put your phone in these certain bags, and and
It was pretty because that one wasn't televised. Not sure why, but they gave us like these monogram books, and it was really that'll stay with me forever.
nice. That'd be pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool. I'm trying to think.
Of artists, it was like Fred Hammond and just those guys I grew up listening to, like learning to play guitar to their music. I'm in the house band playing Heaven with BB and CC Winans. I'm playing Millions didn't make it with Fred Hammond and Marvin Winans tag teaming, going back and forth. It was surreal.
Nice. Yeah, it's and those guys are from Detroit.
Yep.
It's amazing that I think Marvin Sapp's in Detroit too, isn't he?
Mhm.
What is it about Detroit? Gets these amazing musicians.
Everybody, man.
Yeah,
Everybody.
indeed. And so, would you say that like I mean, it sounds like it to me, but I'm curious what your thought is. Do you feel like the quality of your gigs are sort of cumulative? You do one and it seems you seem to be able to get kind of, I think trading up's the wrong word, but you kind of keeps on seeding sort of this other big that kind of elevates the quality of the gigs and the tours that you're on. I mean, like, what do you think is do you feel like there's for most people, is it accumulation of just putting in the time, or do you feel like it's luck, or is it both, or what do you think is sort of like, if you were to write a recipe, Vindell's recipe for landing, a top quality gig, do you think that there's any, straight path to it, or is it just sort of like a combination of things, or one thing, or?
And I honestly to this day think about how I got to do a lot of the cool things that I've done, and I'm blessed, man. Like God has really blessed me as I think about how everything has just unfolded. Like the people that I've met, and it kind of intertwines into your questions, is being prepared, uh, a whole lot of praying, and meeting the right people at the right time is often you'll hear the legends say that every gig prepares you, is an audition for the next gig.
Yeah.
And add on to that, I would say that in every gig is the textbook for your next gig. It's the syllabus. It's like there's, there's always going to be some tool that you take from one gig that in the next gig is like, you know what, this happened in the last situation, I know what to do.
Yeah.
Those kind of experiences.
I can see why you've been very successful at this, because your attitude is actually really really great, and I've talked to a lot of people about this sort of stuff, and that seems to be sort of a consistent thing amongst people that are being successful in our industry. And I think a lot of it is it has to do with just your attitude and point of view. And I was listening to something that Marvin Sapp was talking about, and he was saying that people have this belief that some people are just inherently more or less blessed than somebody else. and really, it's been actually pretty well studied scientifically, and there's actually no real difference between what people perceive as luck or blessing. That nobody's really any more lucky or unlucky in terms of events. It's really about the perception. It's like if you were wearing blue sunglasses, everything would occur blue to you, or if you wore red sunglasses, everything would occur. And so a lot of people are actually like discounting the things that show up for them as blessings as not blessings. And so it prevents them from being able to use that as a stepping stone for the next thing to show up for themselves, because they sort of, overemphasize,
True. Like it
opportunities.
can literally happen to anybody. Where where I'm where I'm from, like this doesn't necessarily happen. You know what I mean? We have an icon in Jonathan DeBose, who's from Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is about 20 minutes from where I'm from. But besides that, as far
Home
as
of John Mayer.
right, I think he's from Fairfield, Bridgeport,
Oh
or
yeah.
and the funny thing is, I didn't even know that until maybe about 6, 7 years ago. I was like, here, and because that kind of thing doesn't necessarily happen, because especially in gospel, there's so many gospel cities, so to speak, where every musician, it's like they have a musician mill, and like every 10 minutes it's somebody coming out just like it's like that. Chicago's like that, Texas. And to be from New Haven, Connecticut, how do you end up? People thought I was from LA for years.
Oh really? Were you living out there at all, or?
Never lived in LA. I would go out there because at the time my friend Gerald hadn't lived out there. So when I went out there, I would just stay at. He's the MD for Mary and Mary. I would just stay at his house. So since I didn't have to pay for a hotel, I was out pretty often. You know. So people thought I was from LA. When I played at the church in New York, people thought I was from New York. Because how else would you be doing these things unless you're from here? So it's one of those things where it's just favors. It's just a blessing, man. Like I couldn't choreograph the steps that have happened. Like it's literally impossible.
Yeah, it just seems like you know, I can just tell, we've really only talked through the internet, so you don't always get a sense when you're reading somebody's text about, their way of being, and I can certainly see that, just from kind of how you show up, it's just like uh I can see that again, this is sort of a consistent thing you see against people that are being really successful in music or in other industries. So much of it is yeah, being prepared is important. Being a good skilled player is important, but having the right attitude in perspective is just super important. It's such an intangible. And I've interviewed guys.
Gotta like people. Gotta like you.
Yeah, they gotta like you, man. Because I'm trying. I can't remember who told me this, but they said, like the best guys don't always get these gigs because you got to hang with them on a tour bus for 4 months or whatever. And it's the guys that are like reliable. They're good hang. They're cool people. They're not like super downers, or they got good attitudes. Because there's a bunch of guys that can play C major 7 chords and stuff like that pretty good. But you don't want to kill them at the end of the tour.
Right. That makes a difference, because being on a tense tour bus is oh man, there's nothing worse than that, because it's just such a fishbowl. It's kind of like, what you say? It's like one of those things. Is just really, really bad. And to your point, like people really want to have to be around you. There's so many amazing players that I've met, that I'm like, these guys are amazing. And you're like, and you wonder, like, what was it about me? Not that it's better or anything. It's just, you can tell that there's some guys that they may have a 9 to 5, and they have families, and they live well and they, you know, support their families. But you can tell that if they had a choice, they would be doing what I'm doing. And I'm saying, well, if I had a choice, I would have the consistency that, you know, that you have. But so it's kind of like a grass is greener. But I've met and played with so many amazing guys that have taught me so many things that you know a lot of people won't necessarily know about. But you know, I always do my best to going back to the memory thing when it comes to gear, to certain things on guitar. I remember who referred it to me. I remember who showed it to me. And I always be like, my friend, blah, 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 showed me how to do this. My friend, because like you never know how much just recognition just does for a person. It may not mean a lot,
Yeah.
but it's important that you recognize, you know, people, especially for the deposits that they've made in your life. And I'm always excited to do stuff like that.
Yeah, it seems like such a simple thing, but it's sort of like reserved for a lot of old school guys, you know, that are just like that want to shout out and prop people up that kind of help them or guide them, and sort of like a lost art, like I don't know, writing a thank you card or something like that.
I literally, Mason, I'm not lying. I literally did not. I was Jon Snow. I knew nothing. Like I came up in a fairly small church from Jamaican parents. There was two. My grandfather had another church that was predominant, had a lot of Jamaican members. My dad had a lot of, you know, American members, and my brother was playing a small little organ, and I was doing something that sounded like drums, but I'm probably the worst drummer you ever heard in your entire life. But I was self-taught. It was just necessity. Like, oh, somebody goes like this, pop, pop, pop. All right, you're the drummer. It was one of those kind of things. Like, but it's like from like where my parents, the mentality that my parents come from, being willing to do something was more important than being good at it. So if you had a willing heart just to do something to help the church, God would bless you, even if you were terrible at it. So I was on the drums being terrible for a very, very long time. And I picked up guitar and I was kind of terrible for a very, very long time. And it's just one of those things you never know how it's gonna turn out. You
Yeah.
know, sometimes you just gotta do it.
Yeah. Well, I bet they're glad that they pointed you in that direction now.
I hope so. So it's that whole necessity. I had to play. I had to push beyond, you know, where I was, because I was never one of those guys who wanted to be better than anybody. I just wanted to be adequate. I wanted to be good enough to do whatever was required. Like, we need you to do this song. We need it to sound like this.
Yeah.
You know. So in those situations, after my brother went to college, it was just me on guitar. There was nobody. And they didn't want to sing easy songs. They want to sing the hardest songs you could ever imagine. So I had to go out and study those hard gospel songs with the keyboard changes. That's why I had to get the sheet music. That's why I had to study music theory, because I did not know. And then you meet these guys along the way that, well, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this, because we would, you know, fellowship with other churches. And believe it or not, New Haven, Connecticut is a quartet city.
Nice.
So being at a Jamaican church in a quartet city, the kind of stuff I was playing was completely different. You know, more like, you know, reggae, ska-driven type of guitar.
Yeah.
I didn't really start playing American music until maybe like 2001, 2002. I didn't know how. But I met a couple of guys in the city who kind of like took me under their wing, Bam Sharp and Chris Dickey, and they were quartet guys. And they kind of be like, when you're playing this kind of stuff, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. This is how you do this. This is how it's. And because of them, I didn't use pedals for a long time.
Yeah.
I had a PV Bandit. That was my first amp. And I had my reverb. It's like, hey man, why are you using all that reverb, man? Because quartet, they don't really use it. It's a lot of dry stuff. So for years, I didn't use reverb at all because of that experience with those guys.
Yeah.
So it's like each one teaches one, man.
Yeah. I think you in a lot of those. I remember, like a lot of the quartet guys were just using twins or even solid state stuff.
Or the JC 120.
Yep.
I don't want to offend any JC 120 aficionados on here, but I was in love with it once. No, I'm not.
Well, I mean, it kind of can be cool if you want to kind of have a more like, I mean, you can get it to sound not super direct, but it kind of has a direct type sound to it, and it could be cool for certain things, if you really want to. I don't know.
The clean part, yeah, the clean part is amazing. I've just been in so many situations where once you turn on that drive pedal, you start smelling the speakers, and there's two people that I know of that I know personally that can make a JC 120 sound perfect, and that's Jonathan DeBose and Joey Wolfall. Whenever they have a JC 120, they make it sing. When I have it, I can't do anything with it.
Mm. Well, you can definitely get those nice cleans out of it.
Absolutely. Once you got a solo, is
yeah. Yeah, well, I've seen guys like, around town here, like in Oakland and stuff like that, where they'll use like a graphic EQ when they go to their drive channel so that they can really drastically change. Because if you use the EQ that you get to dial in the clean tone, you're kind of stuck when you go to the drive, and it's like a lot of kind of 2K, like, and kind of like a really shrill top, and so you can dial some of that out, but still, yeah, not ideal.
More recently in a rehearsal, because a lot of times you just get stuck with it in like a backline situation, especially overseas. But one thing I found is that if you put it in the low input, you'll get a better result.
You got some nice chorus,
Yeah, I have an interesting relationship with chorus.
Oh yeah.
The first pedal I ever had was a Boss chorus.
Which one? The CE3?
Yes.
Yeah. The one that's inside the original jazz chorus is like the big box CE1 Boss pedal, like the ones that don't look like how normal Boss pedals look now. It kind of looked more like rectangular, but like horizontally rectangular, and had 2-foot switches. That's what was, the CE1 was basically the chorus vibrato section of a JC 120.
Wow.
So cool pedal. Nice if you can just take it out of the amp though.
Right.
Yeah. So speaking of pedals and stuff like that, what would you say are your sort of like top go-to pedals that either you use currently or you've used over time that you really like, that you use in sessions and touring and stuff like that?
What effect?
Let's start with just let's start with boost. What do you like for boosts?
You know what? Honestly, I wasn't a real boost tone shaper guy until a couple of years ago, and I found what I've liked the best is the Tumnus.
Cool. The Wampler, the Klon style one.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. What about for Overdrive? What do you like?
Overdrive, the XTS preamp.
Okay, and is that that's got a couple of their pedals in one, right?
Is the Atomic Overdrive, Precision Multi-Drive, and Pegasus Boost. All in.
Got it.
So technically 3 pedals. But
3 pedals in one. Yeah. What about for modulations? That could be chorus or tremolo or flanger, phaser, univibe. Do you use any of those?
Chorus, the Jacques chorus or Meister singer.
Meister singer, yeah.
That's probably the only chorus that I like. As far as tremolo, Strymon Flint.
Cool. What about for delays?
Delays, I feel the greatest delay, analog delay pedal in the universe is the carbon copy.
Do you
Not the dual carbon copy, the original carbon copy.
just the straight up, dark green, 3 knobs, and the truth?
Exactly. It's the greatest delay pedal to me. As far as like that warm, it just talks to you.
Yeah. Do you use the modulation depressed, or do you use it in bypass?
Bypass.
Yeah. And then reverb, what do you like?
Ryman Flint. That is, to me, that is the greatest reverb in 80s mode.
In 80s mode. And you use all this in front of an amp typically?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Do you ever use volume pedals or wah pedals, or do you do the volume adjustment on the guitar?
A little bit of both. I kind of came up doing kind of like the volume knob swell kind of thing. But I had a couple of VP juniors, that string, and now I have the mini Dunlop volume.
Yeah.
I have a Vox wah that I only I only use like if I have to record it on a record or something. I don't really bring a wah wah out unless there are specific records that have it.
Right. And what's your amplifier of choice that you would run the pedalboard into typically?
Backline?
Or either, if let's say, what do you use at home? What do you like to use on backline if you have your choice?
At home, I have a stereo setup. I have a Tyler JT22 head,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a deluxe, and believe it or not, a PV Classic 30.
These are coming up a lot in our conversations, and people have been hating on those. They're seriously better than their Fender equivalents.
My first real amp was a PV Classic 50, and my friends would call it the peanut butter amp because I brought that thing. And if I was doing a gig with the choir or something, that amp was going under the bus. Like it was total workhorse. The PV Classic series are some of the best amp. I can't get away from it. I honestly can't.
There are a lot of people that I talk to that are, in particular, I mean, I know that you're from Connecticut, but a lot of people in the South grew up on those more than Fender, because I think PV's is based in Georgia. Are they in Atlanta? Are they in Mississippi? They're somewhere in the South. I forget where they're from, but they were a lot more available at like mom and pop guitar shops there, because they were like the local, kind of the regional company, whereas like out here in California growing up, I rarely ever saw PVs except for the 5150, which was like the Eddie Van Halen one, and so there was like a mass appeal for that. But you would see deluxe reverbs or hot rod deluxes, 10 times more.
I didn't see deluxes until I started like traveling, because I would ask for, in the beginning, I would ask for a twin, and I'm like, this is not a twin. What is this? It's like some deluxe. I was like, I don't know what this is. And I mean, I like deluxes, but I just wasn't familiar with them because on my side of the country, we had the PVs, we had the twins, we had the JC 120s, and they had the metal amps that I never really.
Yeah, the Mesa Boogie dual rectifier.
The thing about it is, for backline, I'm a Lone Star.
Those are fantastic, actually.
Preferably Lone Stars in stereo, if I can.
Do you get the EL84 ones or the 6L6 ones? I think they're 6L6.
6L6.
Yeah. They I told the guys at Mesa Boogie, because I have a pretty good relationship with them. They're not too far from Oakland, maybe 30 miles. And I told them, man, you guys got to create a Lone Star that is just like a clean amp platform, like, because the Lone Star Clean is great. The distortion channel, I think it's okay, but I think most people that are using that amp are not using the dirty channel. They're just using the clean channel. So you cut down the number of knobs. You can just have the clean channel, make it simple, like, and they said that they're working on something along those lines. So I'm excited to see what they what they would come out with. A new amp of theirs, it's actually really good. I was talking about this with somebody the other day, is the Fillmore 100.
Hmm.
It's their like 100-watt, and it's basically two identical clean channels, and you can set them however you want. So you can set one that's more scooped out, one that's more of a mid-range boost, and they have like I think boost switches that you can engage either on the foot switch that the amp comes with, or you can engage them on the faceplate. And it's cool because you can set two really cool different clean tones on it.
Is it kind of like the Dual Citizen?
Well, I think the Dual Citizen is like two totally different preamps, though. Whereas these are identical. So it's basically like if you had 200-watt twin reverbs and you could set them totally different, but they're in the same amp.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So it's basically the same power amp, and then you can switch the preamp section to two, like you can EQ them totally differently. You can have one way louder than the other, whatever it is, but they're the same.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, it's cool, and I was surprised at the price point. Like I played one when I was at Sweetwater a couple of months ago, because we had to go there every quarter. Is sort of a unwritten rule of working with them and having them as one of your dealerships, and they're fantastic. So I'm happy to do that. But I played one when I was there. I was like, wow, this is a really good amp. Like, I mean, not that Mesa Boogie makes bad stuff; they've always made good stuff. But I was just, it wasn't something that was on my radar, and I was surprised by it.
Just to have that option, especially live, because you can set your clean tone one way, and then your drive pedals may not necessarily agree with that EQ.
Yeah.
Cater to your drive pedal, then you lose the clean tone that you want. So that's actually pretty sweet.
It's a smart idea. Yeah, I agree. I agree. What about guitars? Are you still using this PRS single cut primarily, or do you got some other stuff in the arsenal now?
I still have the PR single cut. I have a custom 22 before they discontinued it and brought it back. I have one of those. But lately I've been using what was that thing? A Paler Tellys, company out of Louisiana.
Nice.
It's pretty cool. I got a Lawler in the neck and put a Seymour Duncan in the bridge.
Like a humbucking Seymour Duncan, or okay.
It sounded great. It was just really noisy.
The one that was in there before you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm it was actually during the last tour. I'm like playing the solo and it's just like I'm like I can't do this.
Yeah.
So just switch it out with the humbucker. So I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot.
Well, yeah, they have those new those silent backplate things now. There's like so many workarounds now for that stuff. But in a lot of the old school, it was a Fralin pickup that was in there before, or what was it?
It was a set of Fralins.
Yeah, because sometimes on some of those old telly bridges,
Lawlers.
Yeah, they won't pot the pickups, and so you can be really susceptible for it to squeal and kind of make noise when it's not potted. But Sir and this other company called Ilyich makes this thing called like a noiseless backplate, and it's essentially on the telly. I think it's built into the pick guard where they have like a dummy coil in the pick guard. And as long as the pickups are wound the same direction, so like all north, or the polarity is the same, that it will cancel the noise out completely, and you can use whatever passive pickups you want. You don't have to go to like a DiMarzio, virtual pickup or something like that. It can all happen with regular passive pickups, which is a cool thing. The thing though that it does is it does add more winding to the pickup by about 5% or so. So some guys that are really, getting surgical with it, they'll tell Lawler or they'll tell Lindy Fralin or whatever that they want the same pickups that they have, but like 5% underwound, because the dummy coil kind of adds the extra 5%. But if you wanted to keep it all single coil, obviously like humbucking, pickups are going to sound different.
I'd have to look into that because I definitely wanted to keep it all single coil.
Yeah.
But I mean, so far so good. I like what I get out of it. I got a TMG Dover.
Okay.
I got a Fender Telly as well, and this is actually pretty cool. Show you this. I actually found a parts Telly and I got Paul Schaefer in Ohio to put all vintage Connecticut license plates on it.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
his company's called M Lounge. So
Wow.
I always wanted to do like a Franken Telly kind of thing.
Nice. You got a leather pick guard?
Yeah, leather pick guard. These are actually third power clear telly pickups. I don't know if they make them anymore because I went to the website and I only see the mag frags now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know that that the owner has always been into a lot of different stuff. They had some pedals at one time.
Roosevelt, I didn't even get to try one.
Yeah, I never tried one either, but they it's emulating a pedal that is cool that a lot of Nashville guys are really into, that Mastortion Ibanez MT10.
Yeah,
So that was kind of the vibe of it, was my understanding. But I think that they just kind of did like one run and that was it. Yeah. So what do you think now? Like, obviously any touring that was planned with Kirk for this year is not happening for the foreseeable future. What do you think is sort of the what do you think is the future for musicians, or the pivot to make for people that are touring guitarists and touring musicians? What is your prediction of kind of what this is gonna, I don't know, what's the changes that people can make to kind of make this viable or workable? What do you see?
um, hmm, that's a good question. uh, I mean, some of us who are a part of ministries still are able to have some kind of functionality where sending audio and video in for for services and that kind of thing. But the only thing I could think of, if you don't necessarily have that kind of outlet, if you're not necessarily the artist type where you have the desire to put out your own music, is to collaborate. Like find some people in your city or in your network, because the world is pretty much bigger now than when we came up. Find some people to network in with different skill sets, and kind of put your heads together to see what happens when the five of us come together. What marketable or what commodity do we have when we join all of our skills?
Mhm.
That's what I can say to that.
Yeah. What's kind of been your approach, other than doing stuff with the individual ministries that you're involved with? Is that kind of been the extent to music for you, or have you been using this time to work on your own stuff, or to just practice, or what does it look like for you?
Besides the ministry stuff, um, God has definitely blessed me to be recording. People are still putting out music, and they're sending. I'll record tracks from home. A couple, definitely getting more into writing and production. Had a song come out a couple of weeks ago for an artist, and the worship band that I've been a part of for about a year is about to start putting out some music. So Seasons Collective. So um, that has been that's kind of been the focus as of late, as well as kind of building that production catalog to kind of have
Yeah,
apart from just playing on other people's things.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I noticed that there's a ton of people now that are starting YouTube channels and trying to do that whole thing. Um, but yeah, it seems like that now anybody who isn't on board with, you know, learning Logic or Pro Tools and being able to do, kind of make their home their musical silo for the foreseeable future. It seems like that's people are being forced into that now if they aren't already.
It's true. Gotta adapt.
Yeah, I noticed that there's a huge shortage of, cameras that are or camera adapters to adapt them to doing like live streaming like this. And there's also a huge shortage of higher quality DAWs, because I think everybody is kind of like just going for it right now.
Try to buy stock in GoPro.
Yeah. Yeah. Although even that now seems like anything on the stock market is speculative at best.
Very much so.
Yeah. Gosh. And now all those guys live up there in Connecticut, don't they? They all like commute into the city.
It's tough, man. It's definitely tough. Everybody's trying to find that. But honestly, I don't think people are more so trying to find that niche. I think they're following what's popular, and by the time you catch up, it's something else.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, I'm certainly grateful to YouTube. Although that's not how I make my living really at all. It's good to it's great to be able to give people an insight into sort of who you are as a person in this industry, and I think also gives you a chance to interact with people in a way that they can be more helpful than just trying to sell them a pedal. I don't know if you've watched any of this stuff that we put out.
Absolutely.
But it's really just my intent in doing that that came before any of the COVID stuff happened, was really just about enrichment, because so many guys that do the pedalboard thing, they're very secretive and they don't want people to know what they do. And at the end of the day, my attitude is like, we're kind of just putting metal boxes on plywood. And so there's really no, as somebody who is motivated to pay somebody to do that, they're not going to be enrolled in watching that video anyway. They're going to go hire a pro to do it. But a lot of guys, they don't have those resources, or they're motivated to do it themselves. Why not give them the information to be able to do that? And so that's always sort of been my attitude about it, in sharing those things.
You've saved a lot of shows with your what's the word I'm looking for? Your troubleshooting videos.
Yeah.
A lot of notes.
What's the worst like pedalboard or rig nightmare that's ever happened to you on a live show? Just like the gig meltdown.
The most embarrassing or the worst?
Let's hear most embarrassing first, and then the worst second.
Oh, the most embarrassing was there was a song that I was supposed to start with the community choir, and I had one of those Planet Wave cables with the circuit breaker.
Oh yeah.
I hadn't pushed it in, so that was pretty embarrassing. And that's when they first started putting them out. So I'm sitting there checking everything, and bloop, as soon as I hit the button, everything was like, ah. So that was embarrassing. The worst was it was a tour show, and I wasn't getting any signal, and I couldn't figure out why. And the show is about to start, and the stage guys are coming. They're trying to figure it out. Never figured it out. I had to just start unplugging stuff. I think I had to take my drive pedal off of the board. I had to like take because normally on tours I'll bring my board, and then I'll bring the True Tone daisy chain just in case something like that happens. So I could just take off like two of my favorite pedals, like what I absolutely need, and then just hook them up. And it turns out it was something going on with my flashback that I haven't figured out to this day, but it's working now. So
yeah, sometimes it can be it can be something really benign, just like the jack is just not seated properly, or some corrosion that's built up in between some of the connections. Sometimes it can be really basic stuff, and you plug it in and you unplug it, and you're back in business. But yeah, it's scary, and the more pedals you have, the more probability you have for a failure.
And you never ever get the benefit of the doubt in those situations. You have guys on keyboards that they don't have to bring, that they just have to either push a button or put a card in and their sounds come back up. You literally have an instrument that changes whether it's because it's hot outside or because it's cold outside. and you have all these cables connection, and they're just sitting there ready to go, just look at you, ready to go, and you're literally sweating and panicking, and nobody understands.
Yeah, yeah. The plight of a guitar player.
A plight of a guitar player in a keyboard driven genre.
Yeah.
Not like you have 2 or 3 guitar players that can come and help you. They're just like, oh, it's not working. No, it's not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they can keep playing their computers. You know? Every time you see a keyboard now, there's always a laptop open. You know, it's just...
always controlling it, going through their sound stuff, and honestly, it's going over to guitar too.
Yeah, I mean the Kemper thing is definitely becoming pretty ubiquitous for the really big tours. I mean, now that guitar is not really the driver for popular music in the same way it was, 20 years ago, unless it's country music. You rarely see it unless it's like somebody who's super pop, like Taylor Swift or something like that. But certainly for the LA based stuff, yeah, you're not seeing a whole lot of guitar amps out there.
I had to get in my head that I need that ampless option that I'm comfortable with, as opposed to just taking a line out of my board. So I hopped back on the Line 6 train that I was on about 15 years ago. So we're gonna see what happens.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other thing that I've been into, if you are going, um, ampless, to an extent. I mean, I think that I really like if you can get away with having a head, just a head. There's a lot of ways you can skin the cat then, because you have all those, simulators
Absolutely.
for the cabinets and stuff like that, and a lot of them are relatively small. The one that I've been using a lot recently, just for like really easy grab and go stuff, or if I've had to record something for a video and I don't want to create a giant Pro Tools session or whatever, is Mesa Boogie has a new one called the Cab Clone IR. And so it provides a load for the head, and then I think you have 12 different preset IRs for their cabinets. So you have like the 4x12 and the 2x12 and a Lone Star cabinet, and some of their all their cabinets essentially, and then you get them 2 different ways. I think the first 12 are like an SM57 and a Royer, and then the other 2 are like and then they duplicate the same cabinets with 2 other mic complements. I don't remember what the mics were, but kind of just like standard guitar mic stuff. And then you also have an option where you can upload your own if you don't want to use theirs. But even just out of the box, it's pretty great. I think it's pretty convincing. I think they sound really good for kind of out of the box stuff. Like certainly you can tweak it more on a aux box or stuff like that, but they're also a lot bigger. This is relatively small. Or even what they call Two Notes has one that's like fits on a pedal board, called the Captor X. And if you could take a head, you could take that. You're in pretty good shape, I think, in being able to kind of make it sound convincing. And if you backline a Marshall head, or you take your own head or whatever, you can get some good tones. Now, stereo though, if you're planning on doing stereo, that's a little more work.
Honestly, if I could, I would definitely have a rack with either 2 or 3 heads with those simulators, and just put it on a truck and take a direct line out and have my cab next to me in a perfect world.
Yeah, well, I mean, talk to Kirk. I think
honestly, for the next tour, I was kind of putting that together, kind of figuring out what my stereo combination was, or if I wanted to do the whole Eric Johnson thing of the stereo clean and the separate head that's just for dirty. Then I had to find the adequate switching to do that, because honestly, that's my dream. I want to be able to have my stereo clean. I want to have the head that's just for the dirty, because I feel like sometimes, well, for me personally, that I have to compromise my clean setting to favor the drive for those big moments.
right.
So have that clean be what it's going to be, and have that drive be what it's going to be, and have the effects going through the effects loop and all that good stuff. But one thing at a time.
Yeah, well, Eric Johnson doesn't even use an effects loop, so you can just do it like him and throw it all in front.
That's all in front.
Yeah, because he's using vintage, Fender Twins, and then for the dirties, it's typically the Marshall.
Yeah, but I saw he has some like new amps now. He has like two rocks and all this other stuff now.
Yeah, I think that the two rock is used for what he's calling the crunchy rhythm thing, but I don't. The two rock has most of them have passive effects loops and stuff like that, so they're not really great effects loops unless you go and buy their separate active effects loop, sort of Dumbleator equivalent, because they're basically saying, well, we're making them to the spec of an original Dumble effects loop, which was passive. So even if you just take a 10-foot cable and you go send in to return with nothing in there, no pedals, it really messes up the tone. So I think that, if you're talking about classic Eric Johnson tone, I think he still sounds great, but I always look back at the 90s and 80s Eric Johnson tones, which to me I think are the best for him. And all that stuff is all in front of the amp. Whether it's the Echoplex or the Memory Man, or
that was also always fascinating to me. I think Van Halen did too, having the delay in front of the dirty amp.
Yeah,
I'm not try it.
Yeah, well, I was talking to David Grissom about this. You know who David Grissom is? And
I had back in the day.
Yeah. And he was saying, oh, people complain about that. He's like, but you just turn the mix down and then it's not a problem. So he says that he runs it always into a dirty amp, but everything in front of the amp, and then just turns the mix down. I haven't experimented with just like barely having on the delay mix in front of a dirty amp, but consideration. But these days I'm mostly just doing the wet dry or wet dry wet thing, and so that really avoids the necessity of an effects loop, and you can still have your delay and reverb mixed fairly high because it's not competing with the dry center.
Yeah, I saw your setup and I was like, I gotta figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, man, the easiest way to do it, the collider that's made by Source Audio. Are you familiar with this pedal?
No.
All right, let me show this to you. I'll bring it up on the screen real quick.
Nemesis, that delay pedal?
Well, it's sort of like that, except it has like basically the delay and the reverb in the same unit. So I'm going to screen share this with you. Check this out. Share. All right. So this is the collider. So it has the delay and reverb in one. I'm just trying to see if it has a photo of it. It kind of doesn't show like a cool photo of it. Okay, here's one. So you can see here that it's got like let me get it back. Pause. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to get it to do what we need. So it has these presets that you can put it into, and then it has this toggle switch over here. So you like click it over to delay, and then you can select whatever delay you want, whether it's like oil can or reverse or tape or whatever. You set those, and then you can slide it over to reverb, and then you have the same controls of whatever you want to do, and then you can lock it in position. Now, the cool thing about this is that you can, in their software, you can put these in parallel. So you don't need to get a separate mixer to put all of your wet effects and control them that way. So the mixer is already internal on this. You can control it through their software, and you can put it on parallel and just lock it so that your presets are all 100% wet, kill dry, the reverb and delay in parallel. So that gets you that situation is solved. The next thing is that you need to simulate the power amp, because typically you take your line out of your dry amps. Let's say you decide it was going to be your the back line you got that day was a Lone Star. So you're going to take a line out, and actually I think even some of those Mesa Boogies have line outs already built into them. But if you didn't, you take your line out box, and you before that you'd get all your dry pedals, all your distortion devices, everything going in front of the Lone Star. You take line out into the collider or whatever wet effects you were going to use, set to 100% wet, kill dry. And then those would feed, this is the easiest way to do it, one of those cab Zeus devices. And I think I showed that. Let's see if I can get this for you. Cab Zeus. Check this out. So this is the cab Zeus. And basically you're going to send the output of your stereo delay reverb into this, and then this has XLR outs that then feed the front of house. So the main reason why you'd want to do this versus say using an effects loop or using it in front of the amp, the advantage is not only do you control the mix of the delay and reverb, but you can control the volume of it relative to the dry signal. Whereas if you're running a stereo system, you can't make your delay 6 dB quieter than the dry signal. If the delay is last and you reduce it 6 dB, everything's now down 6 dB. You can't mix the delay, like the level and the mix, independently of everything else that's running in front of it. Same if it's running in the effects loop. So the cool thing about running it wet dry or wet dry wet is you have your Lone Star dry with all your distortion, all your overdrive, etc. You go line out into your 100% wet effects that feed that cab Zeus, because you don't need to have another amplifier that those feed, because ideally those are just going into something linear. Like a lot of guys even would just return those into powered monitors. Like Larry Carlton would use like old JBL Eons, and those would be getting the wet only effect. But putting it back into the front of house with the cab Zeus, you can pick your speaker that you want it to kind of be emulating that it's hitting, and then it just goes back to those. And so not only can you mix the delay in the left and right channels, you can also mix how much of that volume you want relative to the dry signal, and it doesn't impact the dry signal. They're all independent of each other. So it's a pretty cool way to do it, and I've been experimenting with it here. I'm going to build a rig that uses that Source Audio Nemesis or Collider in combination with the stereo cab Zeus to show people, like, here's a super easy way you can do a wet dry wet rig, and you don't need to haul around 3 cabinets. You just bring whatever the dry amp is, and that's going to get mic'd, and that's going to be one channel in the front of house, and then the cab Zeus sends out 2 more channels to the front of house, and so you can mix these all independently, and you only need to just take 1 amp. That's it.
Especially if you've been doing a live recording.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, because if you have a place that has enough channels where the guitar player can occupy 3 of them, you're gonna feel real good. And it's cool too, because then you can get that mix in your in-ears, and that's cool. And you're not messing around with more cabinets and mics and more stage volume. You just have the one.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. And if you wanted to use your own effects, like your Strymon stuff or whatever, the only challenge would be is that you'd need a mixer then to mess with those, because you have to put them in parallel with each other, and that would be the challenge. But Rolls makes a really inexpensive stereo mixer, which is really I went through this to see that because they're so cheap. I was like, man, how can this be that good? But it actually it has a really great linear circuit, doesn't mess with the tone, has a really nice quality op amps and stuff like that in it, and for $75 or whatever it is, it's pretty unbeatable. The challenge is, though, is that you have to have this in some sort of like true bypass looper or switching looper, because you won't be able, once your stuff is wired into this, you can't turn it off. So you have to have a way to bypass it. Or there's another company that makes one that we already talked about, the Musicom Lab guys. Check this out. They make a thing now. called the parallelizer, which is basically like a true bypass looper that has that you can run all the stuff in parallel. So you can put like 3 effects in parallel.
Oh wow.
And it's pretty hip. It's pretty cool how it does it. I'm just trying to see there's a picture of the back. Yeah, so you have mono, sends, and stereo returns for the 3 loops, and then you have individual controls for each of them plus the dry, so you can blend in the dry signal if you want it, or you can just have them be, return only 100% wet. So that's another way to do it if you wanted to use your own pedals.
It wasn't on the screen.
Oh, let's try it again.
But
Here we go. How's that? It's on?
yep, there it is.
Yeah. So that's this guy, and then here it is. Here's like from the front. So you have foot switch to turn on and off the stuff that you're mixing in parallel, and then you have individual controls for each one of those mixes or each one of those pedals in the mixer, and then you can blend in the dry effect or you can bypass it completely.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool, and I think it also has MIDI, so you could use this in tandem with your existing switcher, and you could turn stuff on and off.
That is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I got a lot of homework to do now.
But the easiest way, though, or the way that I'm going to present the easiest way, what I believe is using that cab Zeus and the single unit that Source Audio makes. It's just like, man, you just need one pedal. You need the stereo cab Zeus as your kind of pretend speaker, power amp. Feed that to front of house. You got your, hopefully they got 3 channels for you.
Right. Hopefully ahead of time and they have the right amp.
Yeah. Well, you just need any dry amp will work, it could be your PV Classic, 50, could be your Lone Star, could be your Tyler amp, it could be whatever.
Amp, I'm sorry. I just used it for a live recording in January, and I was like, this thing is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there it is. Man, Vindell, I really appreciate you kind of getting into the weeds with me here today and talking about your career. And this has been really fun. It's fun for me to get to interact with other musicians, kind of hear about their story, about how they got where they got and stuff they used, their recommendations. Before we complete today, do you have any pedals or pieces of gear that you didn't mention today that you feel like are kind of behind the scenes? You gave us a few with the PV Classic 50. Is there anything that's sort of like under people's radar that you think they should be checking out?
I feel like I mentioned. Oh, I didn't mention the Wampler Ego comp. I was never a compressor guy, but I tried it out and I noticed it's just a noticeable difference, man, in the tone. And another thing is not necessarily a pedal, the interfacer, like Goodwood Audio.
Hmm.
It has, I think it's probably my favorite thing on my board, and it's not even a guitar pedal. just for what it does, the muting, the being able to sum both channels into one if you're going mono, it's just super cool. It's made it very easy for me, especially recording in stereo setup here at home, in different closets. But I would say those 2 that I have mentioned. I saw you post something the other day about a new battery pack, and I kind of put the eyes because I bought the other battery pack last year, and there's certain pedals that I just buy and put away because I know it's going to be on the next board. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things. I got a boost here somewhere too, a Vertex boost here somewhere that I'm going to put on the next board. So I saw the new battery pack. I was like, man.
Well, it's identical. The only difference is that you'll be able to, if you were using it without a power supply, because basically the original one, you had to use it on the pedal board because it had to be fed an input to tell the batteries when to turn on and off. So the idea was you'd have your principal, power supply, you'd use one of those outputs to feed the battery power supply. So when you plugged in your main supply IEC, the batteries would know to go live. When you unplugged it, it would kill the battery, so you wouldn't have to unplug any input or output jacks or any stuff like that. The new one, you can use it that way. Or if you want to use it as a standalone unit, it has a toggle to turn the batteries on and off independently. Because some guys were like, man, I just want to use it on just like the small little, grab and go board with 4 pedals on it. And it doesn't work for me, to do it that way. So otherwise the same.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, cool, Vindell. Thank you again for doing this, and that was a lot of fun. And I look forward to seeing you in the future in LA or here in Oakland when things start to return back to normal.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. See ya.